Mark's hands trembled as he counted the worn bills, $50, his last until payday next week. The babysitter was already paid, and his daughter Emma's lunch money set aside. This date wasn't just a luxury, it was his first attempt at happiness since his wife's passing 3 years ago. What Mark couldn't see was the elderly woman at the corner table, watching him with knowing eyes that had witnessed 8 decades of life's unexpected turns. If you're touched by stories of fate's gentle hand guiding us through our darkest moments, hit that like button now. And make sure to subscribe for more real-life stories that remind us how the universe works in mysterious ways when we least expect it. Mark Thompson hadn't planned on being a single father at 34. The cancer took Sarah quickly, leaving him with a 5-year-old daughter and a hollow space where his heart used to be. For 3 years, he'd focused solely on Emma, school projects, soccer games, and bedtime stories. Dating wasn't even on his radar until Emma herself brought it up one night. "Daddy, Ms. Rodriguez asked if you were coming to parent-teacher night with your girlfriend," Emma had said, pushing her peas around her plate. "I told her you don't have one. But maybe you should." The innocent suggestion from his 8-year-old had struck him like lightning. Had he been so consumed with grief that he'd forgotten to live? Sarah wouldn't have wanted that. She'd made him promise, in those final days, to find happiness again. So here he was, at Rosetta's Italian bistro, waiting for Melissa, a kindergarten teacher he'd met at Emma's school fundraiser. The restaurant wasn't fancy, but it was the nicest place in their small town of Millfield. Mark had ironed his one good shirt 3 times and borrowed his neighbor's cologne. "Would you like to order a bottle of wine while you wait, sir?" the waiter asked. Mark glanced at the menu prices and swallowed hard. "Just water for now, thanks." At the corner table, 79-year-old Eleanor Winters sipped her tea, observing Mark with interest. She'd come to Rosetta's every Friday for the past 40 years, first with her husband George, then alone after his passing. The staff knew her well enough to reserve her table without asking. Eleanor had always been a people watcher. Tonight, something about the nervous man in the pressed blue shirt caught her attention. Perhaps it was the way he kept checking his wallet, or how he straightened the silverware 5 times in as many minutes. Melissa arrived 15 minutes late, flustered and apologetic. "I'm so sorry. My car wouldn't start, and I had to call my brother for a jump." Mark stood so quickly he nearly knocked over his water. "No problem at all. I'm just glad you made it." Eleanor smiled to herself. She recognized the look of a man who hadn't been on a date in years, eager, terrified, and trying desperately to appear neither. The conversation started awkwardly, with long pauses and nervous laughter. But as their appetizers arrived, something shifted. Melissa mentioned her love for old sci-fi movies, and Mark's face lit up. "Wait, you've seen the original Day the Earth Stood Still? Not the remake?" "The remake was an abomination," Melissa declared, and they both laughed. Eleanor watched as the tension melted from Mark's shoulders. By the time their main courses arrived, they were leaning toward each other, lost in conversation about books, movies, and their shared love of teaching. Mark taught high school history when he wasn't being a full-time dad. Then came the moment Eleanor had been waiting for. The check arrived, and she saw Mark's smile falter slightly as he reached for his wallet. Eleanor knew that look too well. George had worn it during those early years when they were just starting out, when a nice dinner meant stretching their budget to the breaking point. Mark excused himself to use the restroom, and Eleanor saw her chance. She signaled to Tony, the owner, who came to her table with a warm smile. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Winters?" That young couple, Eleanor nodded toward Mark's table. "I'd like to pay their bill." Anonymously. Tony glanced over. "Any particular reason?" Eleanor's eyes crinkled. "Let's just say I recognize a good investment when I see one." When Mark returned and asked for the check, the waiter informed him it had been taken care of. "There must be some mistake," Mark insisted, his face flushing. "No mistake, sir. Someone wanted to treat you tonight." Who? Melissa asked, looking around the restaurant. The waiter smiled. They wished to remain anonymous. They only left this note. He handed Mark a folded napkin with elegant handwriting. Some kindness should be passed forward, some passed back. Enjoy your evening and remember this moment when you're able to do the same for someone else. A friend. Mark scanned the restaurant, his eyes briefly meeting Eleanor's before moving on. She simply sipped her tea, the picture of innocence. With the unexpected windfall, Mark suggested they take a walk through the town square where a local band was playing. As they strolled under string lights, their hands found each other's. For the first time in 3 years, Mark felt something bloom in his chest that wasn't grief. What Mark didn't know was that Eleanor had recognized him from somewhere else, the community center where he volunteered teaching literacy to adults. 6 months earlier, she'd overheard him gently encouraging her neighbor, a 70-year-old man who'd never learned to read, telling him it was never too late to start a new chapter. The date ended with a kiss on Melissa's porch and a promise to meet again soon. When Mark got home, he paid the babysitter and checked on Emma, who was fast asleep clutching the stuffed rabbit Sarah had given her. "I think I met someone special tonight, Sarah," he whispered to the darkness. "I think you'd like her." The following Friday, Mark returned to Rosetta's with Melissa and Emma for a family dinner. As they waited for their table, Mark noticed Eleanor sitting alone in her corner spot. "Would you ladies excuse me for a moment?" he said, walking over to Eleanor's table. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Mark said, "but I wanted to thank you for last week." Eleanor looked up with innocent surprise. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about, young man." Mark smiled. "I think you do." The handwriting on the note matched the crossword puzzle you were working on. Eleanor's eyes twinkled. "Very observant. You must be a good teacher." "I try to be," Mark said. "I'm Mark Thompson." "Eleanor Winters. Pleased to meet you properly." Mark hesitated. "I can't pay you back right now, but—" Eleanor waved her hand dismissively. "That wasn't a loan, it was a gift. Besides, you already paid it forward before you even met me." Mark looked confused. "Frank Guthrie is my neighbor," Eleanor explained. "The man you've been teaching to read at the community center. He read me a full page from the newspaper last week, first time in his life. He was so proud he cried." Mark's eyes widened in recognition. "You see," Eleanor continued, "destiny isn't some grand force that only works in movies. It's the small connections we make every day without realizing it. The kindness we put into the world that comes back to us in unexpected ways." Mark swallowed the lump in his throat. "Would you like to join us for dinner? I'd like you to meet my daughter and my friend Melissa." Eleanor smiled. "I'd be delighted." 1 year later, Eleanor sat in the front row at Mark and Melissa's wedding. Emma, now 9, served as flower girl, beaming with joy as she watched her father marry the woman who had become her second mother. During the reception, Mark clinked his glass for attention. "I want to tell you all a story about my last $50 and the woman who taught me that sometimes, when you think you're at your lowest point, destiny is actually setting you up for your greatest blessing." As Mark recounted the story, Eleanor dabbed at her eyes. She hadn't told him the whole truth that night at Rosetta's. She hadn't mentioned that 50 years earlier, a kind stranger had paid for her and George's anniversary dinner when their credit card was declined, a humiliating moment turned into a cherished memory. The stranger had left them a note: some kindness should be passed forward, some passed back. For 50 years, Eleanor had been doing both. As the evening wound down, Mark approached Eleanor with a small gift box. Inside was a key. "What's this?" she asked. "The key to our guest house," Mark explained. "Frank mentioned you're thinking of selling your home because the stairs are getting difficult. We have plenty of room, and Emma would love having her grandma Eleanor close by." Eleanor pressed the key to her heart. "You know, I've lived long enough to know that there are no coincidences. That night at Rosetta's, I wasn't just helping you, I was helping myself find the family I'd been missing. 6 months later, Eleanor moved into the guest house. Every Friday, the expanded family went to Rosetta's, sitting at Eleanor's corner table. And each week, they anonymously paid for another table's meal, leaving the same note Eleanor had once received and then passed on. They never knew whose life they might be changing with that simple act of kindness. But that was the beauty of destiny. It worked in the background, connecting dots we couldn't see, turning endings into beginnings when we least expected it. If this story touched your heart, remember that kindness costs nothing but can be worth everything to someone in need. Like and subscribe for more stories that remind us how interconnected our lives truly are, and how a single act of generosity can set in motion a chain of events that changes everything. Because sometimes, destiny isn't watching from afar, it's sitting at the corner table, waiting for the perfect moment to step in.